The dashcam never lies, as the drivers in these videos were all forced to admit. Get ready for justice to be served ice cold on today's episode of Wham Bam Dashcam. Watch what happened to Brad one night as he sat patiently at a red light. The driver of a white Subaru failed to slow down before slamming into the back of Brad's Subaru BRZ at high speed. Brad called emergency services, and first responders arrived within 10 minutes. Once the paramedics checked him for injuries, the police took Brad's contact info and sent him home. He told us they handled everything, including towing his wrecked car. The next day, he made a claim with his insurance provider. 5 days later, they totaled his BRZ, and 2 days after that, they deposited about $19,000 in his bank account. Brad still doesn't know what caused the collision, as the police refused to tell him anything else. What he does know is that the other vehicle's registration was canceled 2 days after the collision, so it's safe to assume it was totaled as well. Thanks to Australian privacy laws, we'll never know why the other driver didn't stop. Dean was headed home after shopping when an SUV cutting across the parking lot at high speed ended up perfectly behind his Ford Maverick's A-pillar, and the first time he saw it was moments before he T-boned it. Dean pointed out his truck's front end dipping down as he slammed on the brakes, resulting in an impact that somehow didn't activate his airbags. Sadly, the collision still bent the pickup's frame, causing it to be totaled. Dean called 911 after hearing someone crying in the other vehicle, but it turned out the only child was the driver. The teenager was distraught, but incredibly, nobody appeared to be seriously injured. Dean's insurance provider determined the other driver was fully responsible and waived his deductible. Since the collision occurred on private property, all the police did was help the two drivers exchange information. Mike was driving his Ford F-150 Lightning in Memphis when he watched a minivan driver in one of the straight-only lanes decide to cut across the left turn lane. Real fans will know what happened next. Say it with me, Mike wasn't the only one who was watching. An oncoming police car spotted the scofflaw. The party lights came on, the cop pulled the driver over for some instant justice, and Mike carried on with his day. Param was driving through an intersection with a green light when the driver of a pickup truck from his left drove through his red light, T-boning Param's Hyundai Elantra. Param hit the brakes and swerved, but it wasn't enough to avoid the collision. Incredibly, neither he nor his passenger were hurt at all. His vehicle automatically summoned first responders, but that's when things got weird. The driver of the pickup immediately began accusing Param of running a red light. Once Param told him he had a dash cam, he suddenly went completely silent. The police ended up charging the pickup driver with careless driving. Sadly, Param's Elantra was totaled by the collision, but insurance covered the value of the vehicle plus the remainder of his loan. Jeffrey was driving down a Massachusetts highway when he noticed a Rivian R1T hauling a load of furniture. When the pickup hit a bump and the air caught the poorly secured load, it ended up not hauling it for much longer. A few pieces of furniture went tumbling out of the pickup's bed and onto the highway, where Jeffrey was able to dodge around them in his Mazda CX-30. They ended up stopping in the middle of the highway, as did the Rivian. Jeffrey had a great driving tip to share with our audience. Never assume another road user's cargo is properly secured. This submitter was heading home from a gas station when the driver of a white car turned into the neighboring lane ahead of him, but they had a creative maneuver in mind that they failed to communicate to our submitter. It seems like the other driver had wanted to turn left, but a buildup of traffic made that impossible. When they decided to turn right, then make an illegal U-turn, they failed to yield to our submitter's Toyota Tacoma. Only by slamming on the brakes and swerving was our submitter able to avoid T-boning the sedan. Our submitter told us he gave a polite honk and a wave goodbye before they both continued on, grateful no collision occurred. Spencer was driving through an intersection protected from cross traffic by stop signs. But that protection is only as good as the drivers involved. Watch what happened when a Jeep driver to the left ignored theirs. In case you're wondering, those flashing yellow lights above the intersection are meant to warn drivers to pay attention. They do not indicate that drivers must yield or even slow down for cross traffic. The driver who T-boned Spencer's Dodge Ram 3500, on the other hand, had a red flashing light as well as a stop sign facing them, and they ignored both. Then, Spencer told us they lied to the police who responded. The Jeep driver claimed Spencer had turned and hit them, but when Spencer showed the officer his dashcam footage, that was all he needed to give them the blame and a citation. Sadly, Spencer's pickup was totaled by the impact, but thankfully, nobody was seriously injured. This submitter was giving his mother a ride home from work when they encountered an SUV driver who was distracted, confused, or both. Our submitter is glad there were no pedestrians in the crosswalk as the SUV ran over an island on its way off the road. Thankfully, it doesn't look like the SUV driver was hurt either. Mario was getting ready to leave a parking lot when the driver of the Honda Accord in front of him attempted a left turn across traffic. Mario thinks that the driver of the white SUV signaled to the Honda driver that the coast was clear, but it definitely wasn't. Sadly, the only people who will pay the price for the SUV driver's error are the two other drivers. Always remember to check for an opening yourself before attempting a maneuver like this. If you trust someone else and they're wrong, you're the one who will be found responsible. Jurgen was headed home after beating his friend at video games when an SUV driver suddenly cut in front of him. While Jurgen took the first opportunity to merge into the turn lane, the SUV driver waited until the last second, and Jurgen had to slam on the brakes to avoid being sideswiped. He also honked, which evidently upset the reckless SUV driver. Thankfully, there was no damage to his Volkswagen Tiguan. He wanted to shout out his girlfriend Sophia, who watches our videos with him. Watch what happened while Kevin was driving his month-old Kia EV6. The driver of the Kia Rio in front of him veered to the right, then began a sharp and illegal U-turn right as Kevin had started to go around them. At first, his insurance provider said he was 100% responsible for the collision. Since a U-turn isn't legal here, Kevin had believed the other driver was pulling over to stop. Thankfully, when he appealed the insurance company's ruling, it was overturned and his claim was settled in his favor. This submitter was on her way to get some fast food when she yielded to some vehicles cutting the corner as they turned in front of her. Evidently, this enraged the driver behind her, and he became today's Tesla behaving badly. That Tesla man can't drive. That Tesla man can't drive. The driver of the white Model Y sped around our submitter to beat her into the drive-thru, then put his window down to tell her that she's number one. When she responded in kind, they took off without even ordering anything. It's strange that someone who's clearly in a huge hurry to get food would suddenly lose their appetite like that. Then again, you can never really tell what the driver of a white Model Y is thinking, can you? Emma was taking her daughter to daycare in her Toyota Celica when a Lexus SUV suddenly shot across the street in front of her, and she had no opportunity to stop before T-boning it. The impact was powerful enough to spin the SUV around, but thankfully it didn't roll over. Both drivers were able to pull over and exchange information, and thankfully nobody was injured. The Lexus was undrivable and had to be towed away, but Emma's Celica is still driving. The Lexus driver was found responsible for the collision after Emma sent the insurance company her dashcam video. Emma's father Chris sent us this video, and he told us their VIOFO dashcam has paid for itself many times over. If you need one, check the description for links to the exact models we use in our own vehicles. Zach was driving in Greenville when a pickup driver started having engine trouble, coughing and sputtering black smoke as she tried hard to accelerate. As they approached an intersection, she suddenly swerved in front of Zach. After nearly colliding with Zach's Honda Clarity, the pickup driver took off again, oblivious to the fact that Zach had spared her pickup from damage. But her underpowered engine was still having problems as she continued. Alex was driving home after a long day at work when the driver of the Honda Civic in front of him came to an abrupt stop, and Alex hadn't left himself enough stopping distance to avoid a collision. After Alex rear-ended the Civic, his Ford Mustang was rear-ended by a Ram pickup truck, which was ironically being driven by an off-duty law enforcement officer. Thankfully, it doesn't look like anyone was seriously injured. All three drivers pulled over, and a state trooper responded to the scene right away. Alex wanted to use his experience to remind our viewers, pay attention to your surroundings, especially the drivers ahead of you. His Mustang meant the world to him, but sadly, it will likely be totaled after the frame was severely damaged. This submitter was driving in Salem when he spotted a very tall cyclist. That is to say, the cyclist wasn't particularly tall, but he was riding a very tall bicycle. Our submitter gave the cyclist a friendly honk after he used a crosswalk to run a red light, then continued on his way home, amused by the unique mode of transportation. This submitter was making a protected left turn when an oncoming driver ran their red light before T-boning her Audi A3. The SUV driver was found fully responsible for the collision after our submitter's dashcam footage was sent to the insurance company. They told her that, without it, she would have had a hard time proving her innocence. Sadly, her Audi was totaled by the T-bone collision, but incredibly, nobody was seriously hurt. Cody and his girlfriend Kendra were on their way to visit Kendra's brother when a car hauler improperly merged into their lane, nearly pushing them and an SUV off the highway. Cody applied the brakes, but the slick road surface made it difficult for him to slow down. He ended up going off the road and into the breakdown lane to avoid being sideswiped by the semi. Thankfully, they were able to get back on their way after the close call, but Cody is worried there may be some damage to the wheel, undercarriage, and/or suspension. He's already made an appointment to have it checked out. John is a delivery driver who was leaving an apartment complex after dropping off an order when the driver of a Ford Mustang didn't see him and backed into his Ford Expedition. John told us the Mustang driver was very apologetic as they exchanged contact information. Thankfully, the damage to John's Expedition was minimal and John was able to get it repaired. Lucy was on her way home from work when she encountered a curious fox on the road. She slowed down, expecting it to dart out of the way, but then it stopped in front of her. She told us the fox even tried to follow her after she drove past it. Aww, I think it wanted to be your friend, Lucy. Watch this video to see another time a dashcam proved that another driver was lying. You won't believe the stories some people come up with. Or watch this one to see another Mustang get involved in an even bigger wreck.
Wham! Bam, we got a Patreon man. Please support the show.